There is a question Simone Weil believed we almost never ask the people we love. Not, "How are you?" Not, "What do you need?" Not any of the reasonable, well-meaning questions that fill the space between people who care about each other and are busy and are trying. The question she believed was the rarest, most difficult, most genuinely loving thing one human being could offer another was this: what are you going through? 4 words, the simplest syntax in the language, and yet, she argued with the full force of one of the most rigorous philosophical minds of the 20th century, almost no one asks it and means it. Almost no one asks it and then does the thing the question requires, which is to stop, to become quiet, to set aside completely and without reservation every agenda and assumption and prepared response and simply receive what the other person is actually experiencing. Simone Weil called this attention, and she said it was the highest form of love available to a human being. Not romantic feeling, not loyalty, not the long companionship of shared years. Those things are real and they matter, but the act of attention, the full, self-emptying, genuinely receptive act of turning toward another person with nothing in the way, she said was rarer than any of them and more necessary. This is the philosophy of a woman who died at 34, who gave away everything she owned repeatedly, who worked in factories and on farms to understand suffering from the inside rather than from a comfortable distance, and who left behind a body of writing so concentrated, so uncompromising, so completely unlike anything else in the tradition that philosophers are still trying to catch up with it 80 years later. What she understood about attention and what we have almost entirely lost may be the most urgent philosophical recovery available to us right now. We live in the most distracted moment in human history. Not distracted in the casual sense, the wandering mind, the difficulty of focus that has always been part of being human. Distracted in a new way, structurally, architecturally, distracted by systems that were specifically, deliberately, profitably engineered to ensure that our attention never fully lands anywhere. The average person checks their phone 2,600 times a day, not because they lack willpower, because the phone was designed by some of the most talented engineers alive to interrupt the completion of every thought before it deepens into something that doesn't need the phone anymore. And the cost of this, the cost that almost no one is talking about honestly, is not productivity, it is not focus, it is not the vague, manageable loss of efficiency that the attention economy's critics usually name. The cost is the quality of our love. Because what Simone Weil understood, and what the research of the last 20 years has confirmed in the language of neuroscience and attachment theory without using her words, is that the experience of being loved and the experience of being fully attended to are, in the deepest sense, the same experience. And if we have lost the capacity for the second, if our attention has been so thoroughly colonized by the urgent and the trivial that we no longer know how to give it completely to another person, then we have lost something in our love that no amount of good intention can replace.
Simone Weil was born in Paris in 1909. Her brother was André Weil, one of the greatest mathematicians of the 20th century, and from childhood she measured herself against him with a severity that would mark everything she did. She was brilliant, graduated at the top of her class from the École Normale Supérieure, the most elite academic institution in France, taught philosophy, organized labor strikes, went to Spain during the Civil War to fight against Franco, and lasted 3 weeks before accidentally stepping into a pot of boiling oil and being sent home by her parents. She spent her life trying to close the distance between her thinking and the actual experience of the people her thinking was about. When she wrote about factory labor, she worked in a factory, the Renault plant in Paris, on the assembly line, with her philosopher's hands, until the conditions broke her health. She was, by her own account, frequently in pain. Not just physical pain, though there was that, chronic and severe, from headaches that began in childhood and never left, but the particular pain of a person whose sensitivity to the suffering of others was so acute that it functioned less like empathy and more like permeability. The suffering of others entered her. She could not find a wall between their experience and her own. This was not weakness, it was the source of her philosophy. Because what Simone Weil discovered in the factory, in the fields, in the work of actually being present to other people's suffering rather than theorizing about it from a safe distance, was that the experience of being truly attended to is transformative in a way that help, advice, solutions, and even sympathy are not. She watched what happened when someone in pain was genuinely seen, not diagnosed, not advised, not efficiently processed toward resolution, seen. And she wrote in the essay that contains her most concentrated thinking on this subject, an essay called Reflections on the Right Use of School Studies, that this act of seeing, this complete and self-forgetful attention to the reality of another person, is what love actually is, not a feeling that precedes the attention itself. The essay was written ostensibly about how to study, about the right relationship between a student and a text, and it contains, in the middle of what seems like practical academic advice, one of the most radical philosophical arguments of the 20th century. Weil argues that the purpose of academic study is not to acquire knowledge, it is to develop the capacity for attention, the ability to turn towards something, a mathematical problem, a Latin text, a philosophical argument, and stay with it. Not impatiently, not with the goal of mastering it quickly and moving on, but with the quality of sustained, receptive, fully present waiting that allows the thing being studied to reveal itself on its own terms rather than yours. And then, the turn, the move that makes this not an essay about school at all. She writes that the student who has genuinely developed this capacity will find that it transfers, that the same quality of attention brought to a mathematical problem can be brought to a human being, that the person who has learned to stay with difficulty without flinching, to remain present to something that does not immediately yield, to wait with full alertness for what is actually there rather than what they expected to find, that person has developed the most important capacity available to a human being in relationship. The capacity to say, with their full presence, with nothing held back, with no part of themselves already somewhere else, "What are you going through?"
There is a story Weil tells, briefly, almost in passing in one of her notebooks, about a visit to a village in Portugal. She is traveling alone. It is evening. The women of the village are processing around the boats, singing, an ancient, mournful song for the fishermen who have not returned, and Weil stands at the edge of the circle and listens. She does not describe analyzing the song, does not describe thinking about its historical origins or its musical structure or what it reveals about the sociology of coastal Portuguese poverty. She describes receiving it, being present to it, allowing it to be exactly what it was, the grief of those specific women in that specific place on that specific evening, without converting it into anything else. And she writes that in that moment, something clarified for her about the nature of attention and the nature of affliction. The French word she uses is malheur, which means something closer to wretchedness than to mere suffering, and what the person in affliction most needs from the people around them. Not solutions, not efficiency, not the well-meaning intervention of someone who has decided in advance of listening what the person needs. The creative attention that divines what is truly needed, the attention that is capable of asking and genuinely waiting for the answer to, "What are you going through?"
Weil makes a distinction that I want to stay with, because it is, I think, the most practically useful thing in her entire philosophy, and it is the one that her readers most often pass over in their hurry to reach the more dramatic parts of her thinking. She distinguishes between attention and will. Will, in Weil's philosophy, is the part of us that tries, that pushes, that applies effort in the direction of a goal, that measures its progress against an intention and adjusts its behavior accordingly. Will is what we use almost exclusively in our relationships. We try to be present. We try to listen better. We set the phone down with conscious effort and remind ourselves to make eye contact and ask follow-up questions and perform, with varying degrees of success, the behaviors that are supposed to constitute attentiveness. And the person across from us, the person we love, the person we are genuinely trying to be present to, can feel the trying, can feel the effort, can sense the will operating behind the attention, can tell, not always consciously, but in the way the body always knows, that they are receiving the performance of presence rather than presence itself. Weil says attention is different from will in the same way that water is different from trying to be wet. It is not an effort, it is an orientation, a turning of the whole self toward the other person, with nothing held in reserve, no part of you already composing your response, no part of you waiting for the pause that signals your turn to speak, no part of you measuring how this conversation is going or when it will end. She says, and this is the sentence that stopped me the first time I read it and has not let me go since, attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. Not money, not time exactly, not the elaborate gifts that love sometimes produces. The rarest and purest form of generosity is to be fully here. In the last year of her life, she died in 1943 in a sanatorium in England, having refused to eat more than the ration allotted to people in occupied France. Weil was writing what would become her most sustained philosophical work. She was ill, she was exhausted. She had spent the war years working for the Free French resistance, writing political philosophy and mystical theology simultaneously, as if there were no meaningful distinction between the two. And she was, by every account, extraordinarily attentive to the nurses in the sanatorium, to the other patients, to the particular quality of the light through the window at a particular hour, to whatever was in front of her, with the complete, self-forgetful, utterly receptive quality of attention that she had been describing in her writing for 20 years and had been practicing in her life for longer than that. She weighed 47 kilograms when she died. She was 34 years old. The body of writing she left behind, the notebooks, the essays, the letters, the unfinished manuscripts, was published posthumously by her friend Albert Camus, who called her the only great spirit of our time. She never found the wide recognition she might have found had she lived longer. She never found the ease that her intelligence might have earned her in different circumstances. She spent her life in the difficult, costly, completely deliberate practice of turning toward whatever was in front of her with nothing held back. And what she left us in every page is the record of what a human being looks like when attention has become, finally, the whole of the life.
Now the bridge. Because Simone Weil's philosophy is extreme in the way all genuine philosophy is extreme.
It describes something that, taken fully seriously, reorganizes everything. Most of us are not going to give away everything we own. Most of us are not going to work factory shifts to understand suffering from the inside. Most of us are not going to refuse to eat more than the wartime ration of a country we are not even in. But most of us are in relationships, with partners, with children, with friends, with colleagues, with the people who share our daily life, where the quality of our attention is the primary thing being given and received, where love is being communicated or withheld not through grand gestures, but through the ordinary, daily, moment-by-moment quality of how fully we are here. And most of us, if we are honest, are not fully here, are giving the performance of presence to people who deserve the real thing, are listening with one ear while the other monitors the phone, the next task, the background hum of a mind that has been trained by years of overstimulation and the constant pressure of the urgent to never quite land. The person across from you, the one you love, the one whose presence in your life you would list, if asked, among the things that matter most, is receiving a fraction of what you are capable of giving, not because you don't love them, because you have forgotten or never fully learned what love, at its most complete, actually requires.
Here is what Simone Weil asks of you, practically, today. First, ask the question and wait. Once today, once with one person, ask, "What are you going through?" And then do the thing the question requires. Stop. Put down everything that is not the person in front of you. Do not prepare your response. Do not monitor the quality of your listening. Do not manage how the conversation is going. Simply receive what they say, with the complete, patient, self-forgetful attention of someone who has nowhere else to be and nothing to add until they have finished saying the thing they were actually trying to say. You will find it difficult. The impulse to respond, to help, to redirect, to perform attentiveness rather than practice it will be strong. Let it pass. Stay. That staying, that quality of full, unhurried, genuinely receptive presence is the thing. Second, practice the attention Weil describes on something non-human first. This is the insight from the School Studies essay. Before bringing this quality of attention to a person where the stakes are high and the habits are deep, practice it on something simpler, a piece of music, a tree, the specific quality of the light in a room at a particular hour. Give it 5 minutes of complete, undivided, genuinely receptive attention, not analyzing, not evaluating, simply staying with what is actually there, with the willingness to be surprised by it, to find more in it than you expected, to let it be exactly what it is. Weil believed this practice, sustained over time, develops the muscle that relationships require, the capacity to remain present to something that does not immediately yield, to wait with full alertness for what is actually there. Third, notice the will operating and set it down. The next time you are in a conversation that matters, with someone you love, with someone who is struggling, with someone who needs more of you than you have been giving, notice the moment when will enters, when you start trying to listen rather than listening, when the effort becomes visible to you and possibly to them. Don't judge it, just notice it, name it internally. There is the will, there's the trying, and then gently set it down. What remains when the trying stops is closer to what Weil is describing. Not perfect, not immediate, but the direction of it, the orientation toward the other person that is not managing anything, not performing anything, not doing anything except fully receiving them, is available the moment the effort stops. Fourth, Give someone your complete attention for one meal. Not a meditation retreat, not a radical life restructuring. One meal this week with one person you love, with the phone in another room, with no agenda, with nowhere to be afterward. And bring to that meal the question Weil believed was the rarest gift one human being can give another. What are you going through? And then the whole of the meal, the whole of the hour, be the person who is completely, unhurriedly, genuinely here to receive the answer. You will discover things about the person across from you that years of distracted presence have hidden from you. You will discover things about yourself, about your own capacity for this quality of love that you did not know were available. Weil said that attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. One meal, 1 hour, one complete, undivided, fully given here.
I want to close with a sentence from Simone Weil's notebooks, written in the last year of her life, in a sanatorium in England, 47 kilograms, 34 years old, still writing. She writes, "The love of our neighbor in all its fullness simply means being able to say to him, 'What are you going through?' The love of our neighbor in all its fullness, not its beginning, not its gesture, its fullness. 4 words, the complete expression of what love at its most developed, its most generous, its most genuinely other-directed actually is." She spent her life practicing this, in factories and in fields, in Portuguese villages at evening, and in sanatorium beds, in every ordinary and extraordinary encounter with the suffering of other people. She turned toward it, completely, without flinching, without the protective distance that most of us maintain between our own comfort and the full reality of another person's experience. It cost her everything. She would not have done it differently. Because what she found on the other side of that complete and self-forgetful turning toward, what she found in the factory worker's face and the Portuguese women singing and the patient in the next bed, was not less than she had given. It was more. Here is the question Simone Weil leaves us with today. Not from comfort, not from a life that made this easy, from the specific authority of a woman who practiced the most demanding philosophy of love in the modern tradition, completely and at full cost. Who in your life is waiting, right now, in the ordinary moments of a shared daily life, to be asked that question? What are you going through? And what becomes possible in that relationship, in that love, the moment you ask it and go completely still to hear the answer? Leave that in the comments, because that answer, your honest, specific, "this is the person" answer, is not a small thing. It is the rarest form of generosity, and it is available to you right now. I'll see you in the next one.